Hi, I'm Victor Vogel. I've been writing and publishing some books on Amazon lately, and doing that, I had a chance to reread them, and it brought back some of the techniques or what was going on when I was doing consulting. Let me just kind of explain, because sometimes I see consulting somewhat different than coaching. The coaching of today that is done with this video conferencing and remotely, I see often happening with the leader or an individual at an hour at a time, and maybe you have several sessions an hour at a time. Now, when I consulted, that's not how consulting work. Now, I did spend time with the leader, don't get me wrong, but I went to work inside, on site with that organization, with that specific leader or several leaders if I was doing an organizational project. Uh, I had meetings and sessions with that leader. And I was specifically focused on helping leaders understand how to apply the basic dozen or so leadership skills that they apply on a consistent basis daily, and how to do that more effectively. And with working with leaders, the thing that I found was actually the biggest barrier to improving the leadership and then consequently the organization's uh, effectiveness was how leaders interacted with their employees. And in the 1980s and 90s, there was no emotional intelligence. And maybe towards the latter part of the 1990s is where that began to happen. So, what, what we worked and what I spent a lot of time doing was first helping a leader understand how to connect effectively. And that really boiled down to what I have kind of defined in a lot of the work I've done just recently as interpersonal communication. Now, let me kind of explain to you what I mean by interpersonal. Interpersonal is what people now call emotional intelligence. So when I was uh, working as a consultant, uh, I actually went to work in the morning and worked all day on site with that leader. And then part of that was not just working with the leader themselves, but I spent a lot of time with the leader's employees, peers that the leader interacted with, the bosses that the leader interacted with. And in some cases, I even spent time on certain projects that required it, time with family of that leader. Most of the time, though, I spent working inside that organization, but working on leadership development meant spending time with the leader, spending time with the leader's employees, their peers and associates they worked with on an equal level, and their superiors. And so I might be spending time with them without the leader. I might be spending time with just the leader. I might be, or I would be spending time with the leader. I would be spending time with just the employees. I would be spending time with the rest of the organization who interfaced with this leader. And I would be spending time with the leader's boss. So that's what consulting was. So we identified through assessments what some blind spots and issues were. So you got a lay of the land, if you will, and then you knew what the blind spots or the issues were that we needed to cope with. You broke those down into a project. So that's would be the project scope. And that encompassed working or a community kind of thing where, there's some responsibilities. You need to see there's some responsibilities outside of your siloed functional area that you impact other people with to connect that leader with everyone else more effectively. So it ended up, I had to teach them how to connect more effectively before we even began to look at how to improve those dozen or so leadership skills. Most of the time, they knew the leadership skill. The problem wasn't their lack of knowledge about that leadership skill, it was their application of it. And that was really a connection issue in most of the cases. That's what I discovered. And so that required me to not only educate the leaders, because oftentimes the connection wasn't just the leader's issue, it was also the employees' issues, or also the boss's issue, or also the peers of the organization's issue. And so I had to know the full scope of every, where things were in the whole environment around that leader. And I was dealing with that whole environment of the leader, and so that I could more effectively deal with and put the training and development either with the leader. Sometimes I was training the leader, sometimes I was just training employees, sometimes I was training a employee or a boss. Most of the time it was never days. It definitely was never just an hour view. It was always days, but most of the time, the vast majority, over 95% of the time, it was weeks, months, and sometimes years that I would come to work and work in that environment on an ongoing basis for a week at a time, sometimes a month or 2 months, and sometimes I was coming to work regularly. One project I worked on was 3 year project. I just went to work there every day for 3 years. We were changing the whole organizational environment. And it required day in and day out. And it required me to bring in external consultants where I needed them and guide and direct their activity in addition to mine. So that was a bigger project. But from a leadership perspective, to keep it simple here, uh, when I wrote these books, I found out that the thought process, I recognized my thought process in writing was I was not writing these books for a leader to buy and read. I wrote these books for a leader to recognize that these are tools that they need to have, all their employees need to have, their boss needs to have, and everybody they interact with that is around them need to also read and understand and be able to grow with this material. So it's one of the dilemmas about doing leadership books. When you throw out a leadership book, it goes on to market. Some leader buys it, they read it, and they go, okay, these are things I need to be thinking about doing. No, it's deeper than that. These are things that you and both your employees also need to grasp this. So they need somebody helping them work through what they don't really know. So communication is so powerful. people place so much emphasis on your nonverbal things. And when we say nonverbal, most people have a course in body posture. Say if you cross your arms, it means one thing, or if you're smiling, it means another. If you're looking up here, this means one thing. If you're looking over here, it means something else. Uh, you know, it can get almost kind of crazy. A lot of things involved in nonverbal communication that people are not aware of because they are not educated or taught about all the aspects. You know, you might get a 2 hour course or a video that talks about just eye contact or your tone of voice or something. People normally don't take you in segments or pieces. They take your wholeness in when you're there. And so when you're on social media, guess what? You're not there. There's no proximity. There's no closeness. Okay, I can't touch you. And your body and your mind, your nervous system, your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, all create different emotions that create different hormones and chemicals that have you react differently to help interpret things differently. So all that's going on, but nobody's really sat down and worked with you and told you about this, and then in a meeting or session stopped the session and said, okay, I'm here to kind of help you. I want you to take a moment and everybody just kind of let's talk about what just happened here. How are you feeling? And so on their phones or computers, I might throw up a poll on my computer that's on the screen, and everybody can rate what they feel about that session at that time in that moment. And the leader can see this, and the employees can see it at the same time. So consequently, you have anonymity because you don't know who said what in that poll. You just see the general trend. And all of a sudden they can now recognize, and we can go back and say, what were the words or what were the nonverbal cues or what made this seem incongruent to you? You have to work with people that way to get them into the cycle of doing that so that they can eventually get in the habit of doing that on their own. And I spent hours and hours and hours in those kinds of scenarios as a consultant on a regular basis. Or if we knew, for example, there was going to be a tough team session or a tough one-on-one with somebody, I would sit down with the leader first. Okay, I would get an idea about what's going on with the employee. I could do that without talking to the employee. I would sit down with the leader and ask them, let's walk through your planning for this upcoming discussion. Where are you going to hold it? What time are you going to hold it? When is the most appropriate time? Is it just after work when nobody's around? Do you want it in your office? Do you want it in an open area where it's psychologically safe for the employee? Well, how are you going to do this? And most people don't take the time to do that. At least most people are having trouble with connecting with their employees. They don't take time to do that kind of stuff. You have to walk them through it a few times. Then they have to see the difference between having planned it, how much better that interaction goes with that employee, so that maybe it doesn't come across as judgmental to the employee. It comes across as caring. You're not, things aren't going well, and I want to help you figure out how to make them go well, because I want you to have this job. I want you to continue to work well, but we got to make some changes. So I'm here to help you do that. So you change the whole environment about how you approach this. It's still documented, but you have the employee document it. You have the employee write out what is it we need to put on here so that I feel comfortable, you and I feel comfortable that, this is the stuff we're going to look at, and let's set some times to look at it. And let's talk about how we're going to have those sessions, when and where. And see, that's how you connect how you use communication with a particular skill set of feedback, difficult feedback to an employee. How you're going to do that. That's what I did as a consultant. That's what I think I feel uncomfortable about telling people. I have 3 books on leadership. One's on nonverbal communication, which is a great book. It's chock full of information, but it's not just for the leader. It's for the leader and the employees. And I recommend you have someone, either me or someone like me or someone in your organization, maybe an HR is trained in these areas, to come in and spend some time working with you and your employees about how to take what you have written in my books and understand them and see them, how they would play out in your connection in between leader and employee in that work environment on a regular basis. So I, I kind of want to explain that because I get really frustrated with everybody. If there's millions of books on leadership out there, my books I wrote from the perspective that they aren't just for the leader to read. They're for everyone who has a stake in that leader becoming more effective. And that's the employees, that's the leader's boss, it's everybody who works around that leader, and in some instances, people outside of the work environment, because there are times where sometimes leaders take this stuff at home and it causes problems at home, stress. Here's what I'm saying. Yes, I have 3 books out there on Amazon, and these books are chock full of good information to help you understand how to connect more effectively with your employees and other people around you as a leader so that you can effectively apply your leadership skills with those people to instill things like trust and cohesiveness and empathy and compassion in the work environment, which makes the employee feel more valued and consequently engages more. But the books are not just for the leader. You have to allow your employees and those other people around you access to those books also. And you need a methodology for applying the book. The book is information. They're tools you can have available. It's not the whole process. You probably would not look at it from that perspective. You probably just read the book and say, I need to apply this. No, no. Your employees need to read the book. You need to read the book. You need to talk about those aspects of what's in the book and how they are impacting you or not impacting you, and how you might use them effectively together to, to solve that connection problem you have. Okay, hope that helps you understand a little bit. Hopes that encourages you to go out and get these books, you and your team, and go to work on this. If you need me, I'm here. Just contact me and let me know.